I like to jokingly tell people that Charlotte Mason students who spent 1/2 day a week outside observing nature in the fields were going on the original field trips. But did her students participate in outings like we picture today when we use that term? Let's discuss what role field trips and outings can play in a Charlotte Mason education. Welcome to the Simply Charlotte Mason podcast. I'm Sonya Schaefer. Joining me today is my friend Amber O'Neal Johnston. We're going to talk about field trips.
Yes, something near and dear to my heart.
Is it?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, I think that to me, the field trips are the manifestation of experiencing the things that we're reading about in our books, and they have added interest and excitement and turned some things into things we can touch and feel and observe up close. So some of our favorite ones are historical field trips, no surprise for Charlotte Mason families. So historic homes have really helped us envision some of the history books that we're reading and how they would have lived during that time. Seeing a pie safe is much different than hearing it described, and being able to see an old freezer with where the ice block would have gone. These are things that have added to our reading experience over time. I think those are probably my favorite, and the living history museums as well.
I love living history museums.
So my daughter is actually a docent now at the Atlanta History Center. Yes, she
cool.
works in the kitchen outside on the farm, and tells people all about it when they come, and it's exciting. I think she's grown up seeing that over the years and wanted to do it herself when she got old enough. So living history museums are magnificent.
And I remember Charlotte talking about her students going to the British Museum to see ancient artifacts there. One thing she talked about was that you study the time period first and then go to reinforce, as you said, to bring concrete what you have imagined in your mind from the living book. And I love how she says that it should not devolve into a forced march through every exhibit.
Yes.
So many times when I was growing up and we went on a field trip, it was a forced march.
Yes.
And sometimes when our family would be at a field trip somewhere at a museum, we'd see a group of school kids come through and they were being forced marched through every exhibit. Talk a little bit about why that's a bad idea.
Yeah, I think the relationship has to be there first. And that's not just for children. To be honest, that's for me as well. So before I was reading heavily and learning and growing, there was a period of years where I was kind of stagnant in that area. Museums were not interesting to me because I didn't have a relationship with anything hanging on the wall or anything in there. I couldn't tie it to anything. It just was a bunch of stuff. And so our children can feel that way. But there is no delight like seeing a child walk into an art museum and see a picture on the wall that they have studied from an artist they studied. They either recognize that artist's work or that particular picture, and they kind of go wild. And it's something you would, other people are looking around like, is this child this excited about it? Yes, they are, because they know that picture. It's their picture. It's in their mind. And now they're getting to see the dimension and that the paint is coming off a little bit. It's not flat, and they do feel delight, and I feel excited about those things as well. And going to the orchestra live, that's totally different than a recording. You're seeing the instruments being played.
You're feeling the music.
Yes. There's a vibration in the air. They're learning more easily the sounds even that the different instruments make, because they can see that when this sound comes up, this instrument is there. And it helps embody this music. And if it's a composer that we've studied, all the more, because they're just on the edge of their seats. And again, people will say, how do these kids, my kids would not want to be interested in the orchestra. I'm like, if they knew that composer, they would be interested in that. And the same thing, we've gone to see Monet. We went to his home when we were in France, and the kids were walking through big-eyed the whole entire time. And we've traveled, we've talked before about world schooling. We've traveled to Greece, and it was the same thing. These ancient ruins, my kids couldn't care less about that, except for the fact that we studied that time period. And so the things that they were seeing made sense to them because they had the ideas already before we arrived. And to your point about not trying to see everything, I think that when you start, I've had that experience. The kids are whining and they're hungry and they're ready to go. And I'm like, one more thing. And I found that part of that, I have to examine that. Why am I doing that to my kids? Part of it for us was financial.
Yeah.
And that's where I found that getting an annual membership, that's what we would always ask grandparents for gifts. Because if I didn't spend an arm and a leg to get in here and I felt like we could come and go, then we don't have to stay here all day and squeeze all the joy out of it because I spent this much money and I don't feel like we can come again soon. And so those memberships changed our relationship with museums.
Especially with concerts.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Concerts can go so long. And if they're playing 3 different composers' works and your kids have studied one of those,
Yes.
if you've got that annual membership, you feel no guilt about going just for that one portion of the concert and then quietly sneak out again to keep that as a positive experience for your kids.
It's totally worth it because it really can rob us all, of the enjoyment of the experience. But I think that not just in museums and the arts, but also even with nature. And I know Mason talked about this idea of kids that are in the city, leaving the city and going and spending time in the country. And it may not be exactly the same, but when we're at nature preserves or at state parks or at our national parks or at, here locally, the Dunwoody Nature Center or the Chattahoochee Nature Center, we are stepping away from our everyday context to go and situate ourselves in nature and intentionally. And you can call it a field trip or call it an outing, but I think that when we're there, we're very much embedded in this idea of nature study that comes from Mason.
So she is giving us permission for taking a week-long vacation at the beach.
Yes, of course. That's what I heard.
We'll take it. We'll take it. One other thing that she talked about in relation to museums was that this was a great way to bring in other members of the family or friends who might not participate in your everyday lessons, but they might have something to add to that conversation, and they could participate with you in that visit or in that experience. I thought that was a great idea.
It's strengthening relationships and building memories with, as a family. I've seen that when my husband joins us, for things that we're doing on the weekends or when he's off or even on family vacations. My mom has joined us for things. I remember going to the Biltmore and my mom being with us, and that was a delight for the children, for myself, for her as well. And we got to look at the art on the walls there, which you never think of art. When you go there, you're thinking this historic home, but he was an art collector, and the things that we saw while we were there. And having people that aren't normally part of our daily routine just made it a richer experience.
And your kids can narrate, if you will, what they have learned to that other person as you're going through, and have an opportunity to find out what relation that person might have with what they're looking at that they didn't know about.
And we saw that too when my mom's explaining to them who Gloria Vanderbilt is. They were like, "Who's that?" And my mom's like, "Oh, well, let me tell you." You know what I mean? So I do think there is this give and take of ideas and thoughts, and they're growing from each other. And I think even in other areas of Mason education, she talked a lot about citizenship. And I've seen our field trips and outings even add to that when we visited government buildings or learning how our government works and what opportunities we have as citizens here. Historic landmarks where a lot of the citizens that we admire and have read about in history have been and left a mark there in some way, shape, or form. And so I think that even when we're out doing a service project, like community service project, and we're serving in our communities, we're kind of manifesting some of the things that we've seen other people in the past do through our books, and we're bringing that forward to what does that look like in our own context for us to serve our fellow man in that way. So I think there are just endless possibilities.
Any other kinds of outings come to mind, or field trips that you have had a good experience with?
Well, I think for us also, we enjoy stage performances.
Oh,
And
yes.
so that's one area where we've been able to bring in a lot of learning about other people's cultures. So we've gone and seen Chinese dancers and the Dance Theater of Harlem. And we've gotten a chance to see how other cultures, their music comes together with their movement and spoken word, which is a form of poetry, and so many different things that we've seen live. And I think the kids develop a relation. I keep saying the kids, but let's face it, me too, right? The
Yes.
whole family, we develop a relationship with these performers, and we feel like even if it's just a small amount, we're taking something that's special in their culture, something that they that's important to them, and we're able to learn a little bit about it. So I think that's another area we've enjoyed. The tickets can be pricey, but a lot of times they have student performances, and we
Yes.
take advantage of those.
Yes, there's a theater nearby here that has a whole series every season that is for kids, but they're not dumbed down at all. They're just shorter and cheaper, and they welcome homeschool families, which was so great. I remember the first time I went, it was with a bit of fear and trembling because I wasn't sure what I was getting into. I had purchased the tickets, and when I walked in, someone was standing there with a clipboard and looked at the family and said, welcomed us by name, actually. And we had never met before,
Wow.
but evidently she knew the homeschoolers who were coming and how many would be in the group and was there specifically to welcome them in. So it was a good experience.
Yeah, and I think a lot of places are opening their doors to homeschoolers intentionally. We saw the Atlanta Opera in that same way, and that's not something I was like, oh, my kids are gonna hate this, but it was fantastic, and it was Cinderella, so they were already familiar with the story.
Yes.
And were able to follow along, and that was something that they allowed for homeschoolers. And then we have a Shakespeare theater here in Atlanta, and so that's something else that we've taken advantage of. To make sure we go to the right show. But we went to Hamlet not too long ago, and it's a dinner theater. So, we eat dinner at home and then come and have dessert there while we watch the show. I mean, we could go on, but I think all of these things are fun, and they're also an extension of the learning that we're doing at home.
Let's take just a moment to talk about balance because we could spend a whole lot of time
Yes.
going to all these wonderful outings and field
Yes.
trips and neglect our lessons
home part of
actually
homeschooling.
yeah, right, or reading those actual living
Yes,
books that
yes.
set the foundation for the field trips. What kind of balance, how have you found balance over the years?
So I think it's important. We're not trying to do everything. We're looking at what we're actually studying, what we're actually reading about, and looking for opportunities to further our curiosity and interest in those areas. So we're reading these living books, and from those books we're getting living ideas, and then we're going and taking time to selectively explore some of those living ideas in a way that we can touch, feel, or have an experience with. And when you think about it like that, I think you won't have those ideas if you're not reading the living books, and then you're just kind of haphazardly going out and doing all these different things. And that's okay sometimes, right? I wouldn't call it a field trip. Sometimes you go roller skating, and
Sure.
and that's just a family adventure. And so that doesn't mean that every time we do something, but during the school day that's the time my family is set aside for lessons, we are reading our living books and the other things that we do as part of the children's lessons, and we're being very intentional when we leave the house to do the field trips and the outings.
How do you find what's in your area?
So I have set up a extra email address that I only use for all of these places in my area, and I sign up for all their newsletters, and they all go to this one email address. And so I look at all the season tickets, which we choose each year which memberships we're going to get. Again, we get those from the grandmothers, and I kind of set a calendar and see what's coming. So for Shakespeare, I'm looking to see, are they going to be performing the play that we're reading this year? And maybe if it's important enough to me, that could impact which play I choose. And so I know these things usually well in advance. And I just kind of create a little cadence based on our terms, and we make it work. And sometimes we don't go to things. There'll be things that are perfect, but maybe they're out of our price range, or if we've been out of the house too much, and we need to spend some time focused and reading living books and getting those living ideas, we may skip something. I don't think there's ever been anything that's so dire that we have to do that. I don't look at it that way. So those newsletters coming from all of the different art centers and nature centers and our county government and all of that, those have really been very helpful for me, but they have to go to a different email so I don't get overwhelmed.
That's a great idea. Great tip. Thanks so much for sharing how it works with your family and encouraging all of us to keep our eyes open for what's around us, to enhance and add to our feast of living ideas that we're getting from our daily meals around the books and the art and everything at home. And then this is the little extra trip to the restaurant every once in a while, if you want to put it that way.
Yes, it's great. Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.